Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Fare increase being contemplated for the JUTC. No STEAM schools until 2024-2025 financial year. And later in sports, West Indies lose first test against South Africa. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shamela Pula and here are the details. We begin with news that the alleged leader of the One Don gang, Andre Blackman Bryan, and 8 of his co-accused were found not guilty. This is on 3 separate shooting incidents, including a double murder. However, the defendants are still before the courts. And in other news, a bus fare increase appears imminent as the cash-strapped Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, appears to embark on changes to improve its financial fortunes. Transport Minister Odisha provided details at yesterday's Standing Finance Committee. Details in this report.
For decades, the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, has been operating in the red, accumulating billions of dollars in losses. Transport Minister Audley Shaw is optimistic that things will change once the JUTC rolls out its new fleet of buses. 45 diesel buses and 5 electric ones are due to arrive from China in the coming weeks. The Transport Minister further revealed that the JUTC's fare structure is being revised.
We have not had an increase in bus fares since 2011.
But let me ask you though, Minister.
So that is, what is it, about 12 years.
But let me ask you though, Minister, do you believe that
any bus fares at all?
Do you believe that the JUTC deserves a bus fare increase with the level of service that it is rolling out?
Well, I think that once we start with the rollout of the 70 additional buses that are coming, then that will be a fairly reasonable time when we have to look back at the issue of the fare increase.
He says an additional 100 to 150 buses will be acquired in 2024. Currently, there are under 200 buses in operation. Mr. Shaw says the use of modern technology is also key in turning the financial fortunes of the JUTC. In addition to electric buses, he disclosed that the bus company is exploring the conversion of diesel buses to biodiesel to improve efficiency.
The use of locally grown castor oil will represent about 20% of the biodiesel buses. And that's a conversion of existing buses.
Existing buses?
Yes, existing buses. So to make them more efficient.
Carrie Simpson for TVJ News.
Meanwhile, opposition spokesman on finance Julian Robinson says a fare increase will not address the problems at the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC. He explains the company's financial woes as a result of mismanagement at the state-run entity.
And it is being mismanaged badly. So the loss that it is incurring is significantly higher than it needs to be. And the public shouldn't be asked to compensate for that mismanagement. What the government has to do is invest properly in the JUTC, ensure you have good management, ensure that you have a fleet that can take the people who want to take a bus and that who don't have to fight up to go into route taxi and robot taxi on the road.
Mr. Robinson adds that the public cannot afford an increase at this time.
I mean, the public is being burdened by a cost of living crisis. The cost of food over the last 2 years has been significantly high, and the cost of many other things have gone up. The government has to take a decision about dealing with the JUTC on the current trajectory. The JUTC is going to lock down, and taxpayers will have to continue to absorb the burden.
Despite pronouncements of the inclusion of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, STEAM schools in the local education system, it will be some time before the first one is built. Education Minister Favor Williams made the disclosure in response to questions about the initiatives at yesterday's Standing Finance Committee.
The country will not see the construction of any science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics STEAM institutions before financial year 2024-2025. According to Education Minister Favour Williams, only one of the 6 schools will be built.
We know for sure of this one. Obviously, as we go through the fiscal year, we will become more definitive about the locations and about the budgets for those schools.
She, however, hastened to note that pre-construction work will be done on the other facilities so that once budgetary approval has been granted, the process for completion will not be prolonged. But Member of Parliament for St. Catherine Southern, Fitz Jackson, would not relent.
You have one for 24-25.
Okay.
How much for the allocation in your budget for this fiscal year? How much of the schools you are carrying out planning exercise for, which carries a budgetary expenditure?
In our budget, we have $282 million to support land acquisition, design services, and assessments for all of the schools.
For all 6 in this fiscal year?
Yes.
Oh, so it's not 2-year planning for this fiscal year, but all 6?
You asked me to be done, so all the pre-work will
be done in this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, clear.
In October last year, the Education Ministry had a site marking for the first STEAM school, which is to be built in St. Catherine, that cost the ministry some $4 million. But Mr. Jackson had reservations. He says the funds could have been used to enhance the country's education system. However, Minister Williams disagreed.
What that event did, it brought investors out of the woodwork because they realized the government is serious about this place called Bernard Lodge. It's going to put a school there for 2,400 students. You know what that means in terms of housing, in terms of services for students and so on? $4 million pales in comparison to the investment that will be generated.
The 6 STEAM institutions will be built at an overall cost of $133 million. Hal Shane Burke reporting for TVJ News.
Investigations have been launched into the murder of a Jamaica Defense Force JDF soldier last night. He has been identified as Dean Simon from Windsor Heights, Spanish Town, St. Catherine. According to reports, Mr. Simon was shot dead while operating a taxi along Rocky Road sometime after 9 p.m. Head of the St. Andrews Central Police Division, Senior Superintendent Marlon Nesbeth, believed the killer posed as a passenger. The other persons in the vehicle escaped unharmed. More pressure on the government this afternoon for an update on the Child Protection and Family Services Agency situation. Several groups, including E4Life and Jamaicans for Justice, are raising concern. The leadership of the organizations were guests on Smile Jamaica this morning. More in this report. A critical agency without a head. It's what faces the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, since the former Chief Executive Officer, Rosalie Gage Grange, stepped down after the Robansky scandal. Executive Director and co-founder for E4Life, Joy Crawford, and Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice, Michael Jackson, are not pleased with how the matter is being dealt with. They're of the view that accountability must move beyond this action.
What we're saying here is that when you look at the circumstances that led to sexual engagement of our most vulnerable, and I think we have to put in perspective that a number of these children, they went into the system, for lack of a better terminology here, because they were abused within their homes, within their community setting. And in this particular instance, it was institutional failure that led to Mr. Carl Robansky having access to our young girls.
Mr. Jackson says the government needs to look at other breaches to the Child Care and Protection Act. For example, who were the other persons to be held responsible? But even of greater concern is the fact that the agency needs someone in charge. As Ms. Crawford argues, there are certain things that cannot be done to meet the needs of vulnerable children.
When we are interfacing with CPFSA officers on the ground, there are times when we need to escalate or fast track certain decisions. And the head of the agency would be brought in to collaborate so we can have quick actions. Because remember, you know, we're
has to be taken.
executive. So we don't have that right now. The other thing is, it's like walking into a place for service and you're not, whether it be for a good thing or not so good thing, you say, may I speak to your supervisor? Or may I speak to the person in charge of the entity? And then nobody has an answer. Then you lose confidence.
They view the appointment for a new CEO as something which must be treated with urgency.
So we ask ourselves the question, how are we not moving ahead full speed with making sure the Child Care and Protection Act is amended? I think the government ought to demonstrate to the Jamaican people that it is serious about protecting our children. It is serious about dealing with sexual offenses. Joy, you remember that is from 2018. We have made these recommendations around the SOA and the Child Care and Protection Act. And to date, all we hear when these things happen, people come on social media and they lament. I'm sorry, we're going to do better, but we're not seeing them moving with that alacrity. And I know Parliament, they have a lot of work to do, but we're saying that we must prioritize with protecting our children.
The Minister of Health and Wellness has collaborated with the National Council on Drug Abuse to embark on the 2023 National Drug Prevalence Study. This is to investigate psychoactive substance use across Jamaica. More in this report. Globally, alcohol consumption contributes to 3 million deaths annually and to the disabilities and poor health of millions of people. At the local level, the 2016 National Drug Prevalence Survey found that 15% of the Jamaican population between the ages 12 to 65 years was at a medium to high risk for alcohol dependence.
Cardiovascular disease, hypertension, which gives rise to things like, stroke, heart attacks, all the other stuff. I'm a medical doctor. I think I know the brief by now after 7 years in the profession. The harmful use makes it the 7th most important risk factor for mortality worldwide, responsible for 1.5% of the global burden of disease based on the Global Status Report on Alcohol and Health.
Which is why a study was launched on Wednesday by the Ministry of Health in collaboration with the National Council on Drug Abuse to carry out a national household survey to generate data with a focus on alcohol misuse among the population.
It's important because there is enough data to suggest that alcohol can be abused, or its consumption or misused, and that it has had and is having and continues to have a major impact on those who abuse it, the substance.
Expected outcomes of this policy include a 10% reduction of the harmful use of alcohol to result in an overall reduction of premature mortality due to non-communicable diseases by 1/3, and strengthened programs to address the harmful use of alcohol. The findings will inform a national alcohol policy, as well as the development of evidence-based prevention, treatment, and harm reduction programs. It's now time for the Business Minute.
Spurtree Spices Jamaica is reporting that it made more profit in its financial year ended December. After meeting tax obligations, the company made $134.9 million. For the same period in 2021, the company made $91.3 million. Spurtree Spices raked in $168.8 million more in revenues. Revenues for the year was valued at $1 billion versus $859.7 million in 2021. The company says despite setbacks faced with supply chain distribution, it remains optimistic for the upcoming financial year as it made major investments. It says it acquired a property in Port Moran, St. Thomas to increase its productive capacity and to maximize its output. Further afield, new numbers are out and they show home prices in the US continue to fall. The latest S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index was released on Tuesday. The index showed housing prices fell in December for the 6th month in a row. The national composite declined by 0.8%, with all of the cities in the 20-city index reporting declines. However, comparatively in same period in 2021, U.S. home prices actually nudged higher. But the pace of that growth has slowed compared to prior months. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Shane Masters.
And now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, a High Court judge in Barbados has ruled that the prohibition of public officers engaging in active politics is unconstitutional and inconsistent with the rights to freedom of expression and association outlined in the Constitution of Barbados. Justice Westmin James delivered that judgment on Tuesday in the case of Natalie Murray, a public officer who sought constitutional relief after disciplinary action was contemplated against her after she spoke on a Barbados Labour Party platform during the 2022 general election. According to Justice James, the regulation is overly broad, disproportionate, and cannot be reasonably justified in a free and democratic society. On the international scene, rail workers across Greece have begun a one-day strike after Wednesday's train crash, which killed at least 43 people. In a statement from the workers' union, it said pain has turned into anger for dozens of dead and wounded colleagues and fellow citizens. The walkout follows protests in several cities across Greece. And tensions over Russia's war in Ukraine have dominated G20 talks in Delhi, even after India's Prime Minister urged foreign ministers to put aside their divisions. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the meeting was marred by Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war, while Russia's foreign minister accused the West of burying a deal to allow some Ukrainian grain exports. India's Prime Minister has called on countries to rise above their differences, noting that multilateralism has failed. And those were your top regional and international stories. I'm Carrie Simpson.
Thank you, Carrie. And we head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your midday sports report with Karen Madden.